This video has been brought to you by the TLDR store. So spend your last moments before the apocalypse admiring your World with Shoes pin badge. Get 10% off everything in the store by using the code WORLDEND, the link's below. Today we're going to have a look at doomsday scenarios. Yep, that's right, in the middle of a pandemic we're going to have a look at other things to stress you out. So in this video we're going to be looking specifically at a paper called An Analysis of the Potential for the Formation of Nodes of Persisting Complexity by Nick King and Aled Jones. It's worth explaining what some of those words actually mean. So complexity refers to the kind of society we're living in now, one that has gotten significantly more complex in the last century. In the paper they refer to decomplexification as basically a near-apocalyptic event. Think of the serious consequences from climate change, for example. It's something that would cause society as we know it to go back to a time where it wasn't so complex. The authors in the paper are looking for places around the world that are in the best position to survive such decomplexification events. These places are known as nodes of persisting complexity. So that's the jargon out of the way, but where exactly are these nodes? Well, we'll give you a few seconds to guess. Perhaps Plague Inc. is really accurate and Madagascar is the safest place on Earth. Or maybe it's another remote island. Okay, enough stalling. Here are the top 5 places to be if a decomplexification event actually occurs. Number 5 is Ireland. Number 4 is Australia. Number 3 is the United Kingdom. Number 2 is Iceland. And in first place is New Zealand. Now, it's worth looking to see exactly how the authors came to this conclusion. Well, they used another study which looked into climate change, the University of Notre Dame Global Adaptation Index. They used a wide range of factors to determine which country is best adapted to deal with climate change. The end result is a ranked list. What the authors of the Persisting Complexity paper have done, though, is create 3 more variables that account for crises other than climate change. Specifically, they score the top 20 countries on the Notre Dame Adaptation Index on the amount of arable land they have, the proximity to large populations that may be displaced, which would mean more people to feed, etc., and the ability for the country to produce their own energy and manufacturing. Each of these 3 variables are scored out of 5, so a perfect score would be 15. Each country then has their score out of 15 divided by their placement on the Notre Dame Adaptation Index. So, for example, New Zealand scores 5 on the arable land variable, 5 on the proximity variable, and 3 on the energy and manufacturing variable. This gives them a score of 13. New Zealand was scored in the Notre Dame Index as the second safest place to be in climate disasters. Therefore, the 13 is divided by 2, because it was in second, to give it an overall favourable starting condition rating of 6.5. Iceland got a score of 1.2, the UK got a score of 1, Australia also got a score of 1, and Ireland got a score of 0.6. So exactly why is New Zealand the safest country? Well, it has highly favourable electrical energy conditions. Basically, they can produce their own due to their geographical features. For example, it has a lot of hydroelectric resources, so much so that it could, in theory, produce more than it uses. This is a bit of a double-edged sword though, as it leaves New Zealand susceptible to natural hazards, such as volcanoes and seismic activity. It also has a lot of agricultural land, which would help it in apocalyptic scenarios. Additionally, it's far away from any large populations that may have to relocate in such scenarios, meaning that it would remain self-sustaining. Clearly then, it makes sense why New Zealand is in such a good place to be in a doomsday scenario. Let's move down the list and have a look at Iceland. Similar to New Zealand, Iceland can produce a lot of hydroelectric energy, which in combination with its potential to use solar energy, very much helps them to be self-reliant in decomplexification. Again, as with New Zealand, their geographic features that help them with energy production can be seen as a risk when looked at from a natural disaster perspective. For example, Iceland would be more at risk from volcanoes as well. As for agricultural land, Iceland does have some. Admittedly, it's not massive, but due to the relatively small population, it doesn't need to be. It's also helped by well-established fisheries. Again, Iceland is properly far away from any large populations, making it ideal for locking down and trying to survive whatever decomplexification event has hurt the rest of the world. Moving down the list again to the third best country for apocalyptic scenarios, we'll look at the UK. The UK has a more complex energy base than other nations. While it does rely a lot on nuclear power and fossil fuels, the UK's reliance on renewable energy is increasing. Similarly, the UK has a low per capita availability of agricultural land, but the authors claim this is simply due to its very large population. Additionally, it is generally increasing its agricultural output, an output that is already quite varied. Unlike New Zealand and Iceland, the UK is not prone to natural hazards, although the authors do point out that extreme weather could damage agricultural output. This is particularly an issue when you consider the small landmass of the UK. So while generally the UK is in a pretty good situation when it comes to potential apocalyptic scenarios, there are some things it could do to improve. Firstly would be to more quickly increase its own domestic agricultural output. Perhaps Clarkson's farm could inspire some more Britons to become farmers. Secondly, it could more quickly increase its reliance on renewable energy instead of fossil fuels. Nonetheless though, it is still in a pretty top spot irrespective of these improvements. It's worth now quickly discussing why the factors that the top 3 safest places actually make them safe. The authors begin by discussing future climatic conditions, in effect, the effects of climate change. They claim that such events will reduce the habitability of whole regions, and therefore having variation in agriculture is a big advantage. They then move on to talk about carrying capacity, basically the resources required to maintain a population. As the world becomes more globalised, nations have tended to rely on global supply chains for these resources, meaning that if these chains were to break, in for instance a decomplexification event, then such nations would, to put it bluntly, be pretty stuffed. Therefore, countries that are self-dependent are more likely to be safe. This includes agriculture, but also specifically electricity. Modern society is dependent on electricity to remain functioning, so to be considered a node of persisting complexity, it is essential to be able to keep the lights on. While keeping the lights on is useful, being overly reliant on the technology is, according to the authors, a problem in its own right. For example, creating highly advanced generators which require functioning global supply chains would be less desirable than simply relying on renewable electricity. Therefore, it should be clear, given these factors, why the countries discussed are in such good positions if the worst ever does happen. But what do you think? Do you agree with this analysis, or do you think some other country is better placed? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Also, as I said at the start, you can support the channel and grab one of our high quality enamel pins featuring the countries with shoes designs by clicking the link below. And get 10% off everything in the store, including all of these designs, by using the code WORLDEND. Thanks for your support. And be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we post a video. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible, and if you want to see your name at the end of the videos, then you too can back us on Patreon. The link to that's down below.